Do you find that you are able to say what you truly want to say? So you're able to say yes when you want to say yes. You say no when you want to say no. You invite someone in when you want to have closeness, or you're able to have boundaries when you need to have space. If you find that you have challenges in any of those things, it's possible that some of the algorithms and internal working models you have for communication come from when you were very little. So something I like to do with clients is have them draw a diagram to help visualize where some of these experiences might have come from and how that is informing their experiences now. So with this, I like to have a diagram where it's basically, I call it caregiver 1 and caregiver 2. So this might be mother and father, and then you in the middle. So there's a few different dynamics that are important to notice about what happened when you were little. One is the communication patterns that were happening between your mother and father, or caregiver 1, caregiver 2, as well as the communication dynamics that were happening from, let's say this is father, caregiver 1, and mother, caregiver 2, to you specifically. And you may have siblings, but we're just going to focus on this triad right now. So one of the big kind of questions about communication in general when it comes to these dynamics is, for example, with your parents, was communication something that restored and repaired the relationship? Or was it something that damaged the relationship? In terms of the average, in terms of the pattern, obviously there would be exceptions to all of this, but what is generally stored within you the most are the negative interactions. So if one closed off communication quite a bit and one kept trying to keep it open, or vice versa, these are different patterns that are going to let you know that, for example, communication is sometimes, in a sense, dangerous or ineffective. And these are things that get created as basically algorithms and internal working models for you to use for future interactions. So another dynamic just to think about in terms of that is what it was like with, let's say, caregiver 1, let's say that's father and you. Was it possible for you to have a very free-flowing kind of information exchange where you truly said what you wanted to say? You got excited when you were excited, when you were upset, you were upset. And that was something that allowed for communication to continue to flow with that caregiver, and it allowed for a restoration, even if there was still challenges and upsets and anger and fights. If the communication channel still more or less stayed open and there was still a restoration of the relationship, then that would be considered like decent signal flow, decent communication flow. If, let's say, with another caregiver, let's say mother, when you wanted to be nurtured or you were upset or overly excited, was that shut down? Was that minimized? Was that diminished in some way, rejected or ridiculed? Those are some examples of things that, if that happened, there's going to be other algorithms that get created. Sometimes we have these algorithms related to the gender of the caregiver. So if you're, let's say with your father, there was a certain kind of communication pattern that was very safe and restorative, you may have, for the most part, algorithms related to male communication, or you to male communication as being restorative and healthy and not something to fear or avoid. Whereas, let's say with mother, there's a different kind of communication pattern that might create an algorithm in terms of your communication dynamics with women, for example. Or in terms of, it may not even be gender, but authority figure and where they were in their power dynamic as well. How you are with authority figures and how you speak and what you think communication will bring you. Will it bring you safety and restoration? Will the channel stay open really well? Or is there more of a predictive algorithm that there's really no point, for example, to having communication? So that can create different dynamics of sometimes avoidance of communication. So if it felt like there wasn't much point, or it got shut down, or there was something that really didn't restore or really help the relationship or you, in a sense, to regulate yourself through communication, then you might have a tendency of avoiding talking about things and just shutting that off and being very self-reliant in terms of your own self-regulation. On the other hand, if certain things got shut off, but there were times where you were able to open kind of the floodgates and figure out how to create some, communication channels. Sometimes I can also create an algorithm where any chance you get in talking with somebody, if there's a challenge in the relationship, you over communicate, you open the floodgates, and you want to over explain and appease or contort in some way. So just the thing to just think about in terms of your communication patterns and where you're kind of coming from in terms of how you are truly saying what you want to say is, first of all, just getting in touch with what do you think some of your algorithms might be based on your past. Do you truly believe that communication can restore and repair relationships? Or do you see it as being something that doesn't do that or is ineffective? If whichever one that is for you, if there's a lot of distress when it comes to communication and you tend to avoid it, or you tend to overdo it and over communicate, then that's where you can start to just play with that. So if you tend to avoid and shut down communication, it might be worth thinking about opening up the channels a little bit more and testing those waters in order to create a new algorithm with your new mature adult circuitry as it is now with relationships, to experiment and use trial and error to figure out how communication actually can be something that really rejuvenates and restores and creates really incredible relationships. And if you're someone who really says yes when you want to say no, and you over explain or you over appease, there is likely some sort of dynamic that happened there as well, whether through parents or between you and one of the caregivers. So in that case, then it might be worth thinking about how do you kind of not be quite so yes saying and appeasing, and maybe look at having a little bit dialed down of that kind of language, and or tuning into your feelings and really getting a sense of what you're actually feeling, and then being able to find words for that without over explaining and over appeasing. So those are just a couple of dynamics to think about in terms of communication. And it's just important for us to understand that so much of what we believe communication is for and the results of it have a lot to do with what we saw going on between the caregivers in our environment, how they were with each other and how they were with us in terms of that. So know that there's a possibility of experimenting with new ways of doing it now. And that's kind of the only way you'll build a new track record and update your algorithms in terms of how to use communication and how to make it more effective. So there's going to be some more videos to come on this type of topic, and you can check out my website at stephaniefay.com. Thanks.